Are you aware that you're muted?
Well, welcome everyone to our August 8th City Council meeting. It's a beautiful night out there, and we're all here doing public service. So thank you all for being here. So tonight we're going to review a proclamation that we have in support of the farmers market. We're going to then go through our consent agenda. We have some new business looking at procuring materials for our new water treatment plant and reservoir. In addition, we have a few different resolutions and ordinances we're going to be going through. We'll be discussing a recent vacancy on the inclusivity committee before going to staff and council reports. But first, we're going to go ahead and get started with a roll call.
Jessica Andrade.
Present.
Catherine Bisco. Here. Ruth Causey.
Here.
Matt Lehman.
Here.
David Lowe.
Here.
Teresa Nielsen.
Here.
Chaz Jones.
Here. Wonderful. So first on the agenda, we have a proclamation, and just wanted to note that city staff is going to reformat it in the form of a resolution, and it will become resolution 22-12. And we'll do that before its signature. But because of that resolution, I'm looking for a motion to from the city council to go ahead and pass the resolution supporting the farmers market.
So moved.
So we have a motion made by Councilor Bisco, seconded by Councilor Lowe. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, just wanted to mention that Janelle brought this resolution and asked if she submitted it through our online tool for the public to submit proposed resolutions. And it was amazing because she actually submitted it literally minutes after a meeting in which at the inclusivity committee where we talked about it. And so I was like, were you watching that? Did you submit it? She said, no. And I was just really just surprised. And so anyway, it came through and I was really excited about that. But I'm really supportive of this proclamation. I love our farmers market. I love what it does for our community, for the community building aspect it provides, for the healthy foods, regionally produced, local economic boost. Thank you for all your work that you do with the farmers market, Janelle. So thank you. With that, is there any? I don't have any suggested edits. I was wondering if anyone has any questions or comments on the resolution. Okay, with that, all in favor of passing this resolution as moved, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. I'm not going to go ahead. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but thank you so much, Janelle. Again, this is really great, and yeah, we're really all very proud of the work that you do at the farmers market. So thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we have a public comment period. And is there anyone signed up for public comment?
I've not received any sign-up requests.
So with that, we will go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. And welcome a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Excellent. So we have a motion made by Councilor Lehman and seconded by Councilor Nielsen. Any further comments, edits? Councilor Causey.
One minor correction on the work session notes, page 2, line 7. I believe it should be in legislative management of their use rather than the use.
Okay. Minor edit there. Any further comments, edits, corrections? Okay, with that, all in favor of passing the consent agenda with the minor Scrivener's errors, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Again, thank you very much for that. So next on the agenda, we have some new business. And I believe that, see, Andrew, you gonna take that? Or are you gonna let?
I can take this one. So, that page. You might have heard we're building a new water treatment plant and reservoir. And speaking with the engineers that are helping with the final design on this, their recommendation, their strong recommendation to the city, to staff, and our recommendation to you is that we procure the pipe that we'll need for this project now, rather than waiting until after we bid the project and then end up having delays waiting for pipe that needs to be ordered. They're building pipe and shipping it as quick as they can, but there's just so much demand for it right now. We're seeing lead times of 8 months to 12 months plus on pipe. Ordering the pipe now gives the city the advantage that when we do go out for bid on this project, we can include in that RFP that we've already got the pipe in our possession. I think it's give us much stronger competitive bids and lower bids, because they're going to know that that's one less uncertainty that they have to deal with, both the timing and the cost aspect of it. So I don't see pipe going down in cost anytime over the next 2 to 3 years. I really just don't see any downside in going through and getting all the pipe that we need as quickly as we can for this project. My belief, and in talking with the engineer, they've kind of confirmed, I think that this is going to become a new norm for a while at least, that we're going to look for material acquisitions prior to going out for RFPs for construction, just because of the supply issues that the entire nation is facing right now. On the technical side, we did go through the formal procurement process. We followed our policy, went out to the entire state. We got competitive bids, and we're looking to split our purchase between the two bids that we received, the two companies that bid on us. Neither of them can provide all the pipe that we need on their own, but between the two of them, we can get the pipe that we need. And so that's been the city engineer's recommendation. So we're just looking for approval from the city council to move forward with the procurement of pipe that we're going to need for the reservoir and the treatment plant.
Excellent. Councilor Lowe?
I move that the city purchase the materials that were bid.
Thank you.
And I'll second.
So we have a motion made by Councilor Lowe and seconded by Councilor Nielsen. Any comments, questions? Councilor Lehman? Oh, I'm sorry, do you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, I think what the city manager described and what's outlined here makes perfect sense. I don't see any issue there. I do have a question though, when we're talking about splitting up between the two bidders. If you look at the schedule that we got, so for instance, Ferguson is about almost $2,000. Just looking, say, at Schedule 1, Class A, 16-inch, Class 52 ductile iron pipe. Ferguson is $35,600 for 400 linear feet. And Core and Main is $37,600. So when we go out to bid, are we going to go with the lowest bid? Can we pick and choose then the lowest of those? Is that how it works?
We'll be able to pick the lower for each of the different
For each,
materials.
okay.
And there's going to be some adjustments. Oh, Mr. Fear is on the screen. He can talk much more intelligently to this, but I do know that there's been some adjustments that are going to be made to the final design based on the availability of the pipe that we can actually get. So some pipe, there is no time frame for when we're going to get it. So we're actually going to change some of our design standard to meet, again, just be able to get it in time to build it this fall still. So Mr. Fear, how did I do? Did I butcher that, or do you have any other added input before?
You stated that pretty correctly. Just might add that the pricing is without shipping, so it could very easily, Ferguson could very easily come out over the top and be more expensive than Core and Main does. It depends on how fast and where they can get it. There are, a few sticks in Utah, I think, and a few more all around. There's 3 or 4 different stores that they might be able to secure enough to get the reservoir started, or at least the pipe under the reservoir. So that was the reason for using both suppliers.
The big push is to get up out of the ground this fall before it gets wet, so that they can actually start construction on the reservoir and not be down in the mud. The treatment plant itself will be bumped into the spring, which means really until it's dry enough to start going. But we definitely want to get the pipe in the ground under where the reservoir is when we go, so we can get up out of the ground before it gets too wet and they can't start construction.
Thank you. And I saw Council Lehman, and then I saw Council Andrade, and I believe Council Bisco, and then Council Costi. Thank you.
How's the pricing coming out compared to what was originally put in for the budget?
I'll let Mr. Fear respond to that. Kevin, did you hear the question okay?
Yeah, it's more expensive than what it was before the supply problems hit, but given the circumstances, having a contractor on board and no pipe to put in the ground would end up costing us quite a bit more in lost labor.
Thank you.
I guess I was looking more for like percentages, like is it 10% more than we expected or budgeted for, or 20% more?
I don't have a good feel for that. Pipe pricing is always volatile anyway, but right now I'd say probably somewhere in the 15 to 18%.
Thanks.
Thank you. Council Andrade?
Yes, just kind of based off of what Kevin had just said about, so are you saying that it's regardless of like, hey, we're going to have the pipe by this time, what bid are you submitting if you were going to build it for us? Like you can't, are you saying that it'll be expensive regardless of whether or not, sorry, let me rephrase. What is preventing us from asking for a bid for the construction work only minus the parts and then going after the parts in a bid later? So that we have that comprehensive price bid like altogether, you know?
You could be putting the project off 6 months to a year.
And it's just because of availability?
Yes. Pipe itself now, most pipe and a lot of the fittings are, I think, I don't know if he included the estimate. I didn't see what he actually sent over. I guess not. Some
Sorry,
of
I
them are
guess
20 weeks.
I guess my question is more of why didn't we have a bid set out now, besides the bids that went out now for the supplies and everything, a simultaneous bid that was only looking at the building of the reservoir minus the parts, because we had this separate bid process out
Because
for
they
parts.
have been waiting for the bridge. There's a small bridge that goes across the ditch to reach the treatment plant. There's been a couple of other engineering firms that have been involved that have been lagging behind. So without
Okay.
having all the specs together, you can't really put a bid out.
Gotcha. So we were still just missing that information to begin
Yes.
with. So we're trying to get ahead of the horse by getting materials. And so do we have that information now? Or is that something that we're still waiting on?
He expects it to, he's putting the bid documents together and was just waiting on one last sign off on the little bridge that goes across. So he was thinking it'd probably hit the papers in another week and a half or 2 weeks.
Okay. And so waiting another week and a half, 2 weeks to put these two bids out would still delay the project, but we'd have the added benefit of knowing more or less what the total cost would be. Is that correct?
No, because contractors tack on usually about 15% on top of their pipe or on top of their materials to cover their labor and unloading and profit and everything else. So letting the contractor buy it could actually push the prices up on.
No, sorry. I
pipe.
mean, having the two separate ones as well still.
I'm not sure I understand where you're
So
going.
holding off on this bid for the materials and having it separate from the other build for the construction, and having them both go out at the same time, but just having them split up so that we would still be getting the parts in, but we would have prices locked in place for the materials and for the cost of labor to build everything. Does that make sense?
It does. There's no guarantee that those parts would be available. You'd have a contractor on board ready to go that bid on it with the fact that he expected or she expected to go to work right away on it. So they come on board, they dig a couple holes or maybe start to do some grading, and then the pipe is another 6 weeks out and they have to demobilize and pull out.
Okay.
It's just costing us money and
Keeping them on hold without digging those holes is out of the
Correct.
question.
correct. If we
Okay,
can get the
that was
pipe-
what I was trying to get at.
Okay,
Thank
if we
you.
can get the pipe and fittings here
Mm-hmm.
and have it ready for them when that or at least close when that contractor gets here and starts doing all the grading and everything else. Hopefully the pipe will be available along with fittings at the same time. That's what this is for, is to try to get the pipe on its way, because it's a lot farther out than what getting a contractor is. So
Yeah, no, I understood that. I just wasn't sure if we could still have them on hold,
Thank you very
and then
much.
we'd have that whole price together so that we're not going in blindly, not knowing what the total cost will actually be. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Kevin. I think you answered the question.
Okay.
Councilor Bisco?
Thanks. I just have a couple questions from the letter from West Tech Engineering when it's talking about, in some cases, the delivery time to procure ductile iron pipe valves and fittings can exceed 7 months. What kind of, so that's one question. What's our deadline to get this here so that presumably we can begin work this fall?
Could you hear that, Shafir?
yeah, it would be, well, from talking to the engineer on this, if we were waiting on pipe and fittings to get it in the ground, it could push the project off. If the pipe and fittings do not make it in by the time we have a contractor on board or shortly thereafter, because there's work to do before we have the pipe, but not a whole lot. We'd be probably, if we get into the wet season, we'd be pushing it off until probably June or July of next year.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question. So being that the freight cost is not part of these bids, do you have an estimated, with freight being as high as it is, any idea what that freight cost might be on top of these materials costs?
It would be at time of shipping. We're finding that with everything. Anytime any shipments that come through are priced at time they ship them.
Any range of what those overages have been recently, just due to fuel costs?
Probably if they can ship almost a full truckload to us, maybe $1,200.
Thank you. Thank you. And Councilor Causey?
Two quick questions for Mr. Fear. Are these materials manufactured in the United States or are they coming from overseas?
No, we only use domestic fittings, domestic pipe. The grant that we received from the state is also specifies that it has to be American-made steel.
Okay, thank you. And do you have any concerns about mixing materials from different suppliers?
They all get them from the same place. Some of them just have it in stock and there's in other stores around. Some of them have orders in waiting for some of the product to come in. But basically, other than pipe, there are a few different manufacturers of pipe and they all intermingle fine.
Okay, thank you.
And then I have one question. Do you have any concerns about how the designs may or may not change after we have all the pipe? Or will the designs be dictated by the pipe that we have on hand? And will that matter?
It doesn't matter. There's still a lot more pipe and fittings to purchase, but for the treatment plant itself, this is just enough pipe to get us under the road and get under the reservoir and get that piping straightened out to get the contractor moving.
Thank you. And then we have another question by Councilor Andrade.
Could you please remind me what the total cost is of that we had priced out a while ago, the estimate for the reservoir, and then clarify what the 7.5% of the total contract value, what the this is in the line in the West Tech letter where it says this constitutes 7.5% of the total contract value. And I wasn't sure if that meant the margin of $10,200 or if it was talking about, I guess it's probably not that, it's probably the price of all the schedules.
I believe so, yes.
The price of all the
All the
schedules from either supplier.
Yes.
Or either bid company. And then so then that means that the original pricing out of the reservoir was what?
No, I think the 7.5% is the difference between the two. Is it not?
Okay.
Between Core Main and Ferguson, I don't have a calculator sitting here.
That's what I thought, but I also didn't do the math.
Yeah, I believe that's what he was talking about. Just because that's all we're talking about is purchasing of the pipe and materials at this point.
Okay. And then, but we had an original quote, right, of the reservoir?
For the construction, just an engineer's estimate.
And
I
what
don't-
was that?
No, I don't know if it was broke out completely. Chris might remember it better than I do. $14.5 million for both the reservoir and treatment plant.
For both of them.
Yeah, I think the reservoir was at, I don't remember top of my head, sorry, 2.8, 3.2, something like that. Maybe
Yeah.
3 million. Haven't looked at these
Okay.
engineering estimate level numbers in a while.
Yeah, just trying to get a better sense of like what the percentage this would constitute of that money that we had set aside for the reservoir, and then having whatever that rough estimate is of the water treatment plant construction, or sorry, not the water treatment plant, the reservoir construction itself, to make sure that it doesn't seem like we're going over, because that's my main concern, is that we're talking about spending a lot of money right now when there are so many things that are up in the air, and I just want to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible. So if you have those numbers at the ready, Chris, that would be helpful. But I also understand if you don't.
I don't.
Yeah, I don't have them handy.
So, yeah, and if it was $3 million, and that seems to trigger some memory strands, that'd be about, the total would be about 5% of that. Is that right? So we have this motion. Any further comments, questions? Seeing none. All in favor of moving to that the city purchase the materials as they were bid, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Great, thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Fear, for looking out for the city and trying to make this so the process will work much more smoothly.
Thank you. I'm texting the engineer right now so we can get us in line for getting the pipe and stuff, because it's that tight. He's sending it in tonight.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And so with that, we have ordinance, well, we have Catherine Daniel here to join us, and Assistant City Assistant Manager, do you want to go ahead and introduce Catherine?
Yes, so I'll just give a brief intro on the agenda item. There's a minor correction. It is resolution 22-11, not 10. Just if you want to make note of that. And just wanted to say that city staff, Public Works, Kevin Fear, Gary Black, and myself have been working with Catherine Daniel, who's facilitating an update to Benton County's multi-jurisdictional natural hazard mitigation plan. It's a mouthful. And Catherine's been doing a great job, so we've been meeting with her, and she's just here to give a brief introduction to what we're working on here, just a couple minutes, and our cost share, because that might have been a question that some people had. It was a question I had. So Catherine, if you could just give a little introduction on what we're working on and the cost share portion of it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'm a natural hazards planner with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And we have received a grant from FEMA via the Office of, or the Department of Emergency Management, now their department. And one of the projects within that grant is the update of the Benton County Multi-Jurisdictional Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan, which is a mouthful, so we just call it the NHMP. And what that document is an identification and analysis of the various hazards faced by the county and the cities within it, as well as any special districts that want to join us. So that constitutes the multi-jurisdictional part of it. It's led by the county, but joined in by the cities and various special districts who want to have a natural hazard mitigation plan. And the purpose principally of having such a plan is so that the entity, and in this case, the city, is eligible for FEMA grant funding. Now that is post-disaster grant funding as well as pre-disaster grant funding. So it's certainly imperative to have such a thing in place if there should be a natural disaster, because funding for post-disaster mitigation is incumbent. It's a requirement to have such a plan in order to apply. The sort of added future-looking, forward-looking reason to have an NHMP is so that you can do work that will mitigate or reduce the risk of natural hazards to the city. And that can take the form of a number of different things. I was searching through the current NHMP just now to see whether updates to the reservoir and the water treatment system was part of the plan previously. It's not, but I don't know whether it's involved in, whether mitigation for such things as earthquake is among the concerns for that, but nonetheless. So the advantage of having an NHMP is so that you can apply for FEMA grant funding, and that can sometimes be substantial and involve public works projects or other high dollar type projects that reduce risk from things like flooding or wildfire. And so we go through a process that Chelsea and Kevin have been involved in. Oh, and I forgot, I was looking at my list of folks who participated. Yeah, Rich Salsa has also been involved. Right, so so we've gone through just the beginning process to sort of identify the hazards that are faced. And the way that we DLCD like to work with jurisdictions is to have you sign an agreement, intergovernmental agreement that lays out what the purpose is, who's going to do what, and lay out the agreements that we anticipate going forward. So that's what I believe you received from Chelsea. Among the things that the city agrees to do is to provide a portion of the 25% cost match that we are required, DLCD is required to put into the deal. Among the ways that we do that is to accumulate reporting from people like Kevin and Chelsea and Rich, identifying the time that they spent on the project and matching that with their salary and benefit information to show an in-kind contribution. The language in the IGA allows for the cost share to be, I'm just touching on this because this is a common question. The meat of the NHMP deals little with this, but it's a common question. So the IGA identifies that jurisdiction can provide cash, in-kind, or a combination of the two as their portion of the cost share. And I've never seen a city or special district hand over a check. So we wouldn't want that either, because part of the value in having people engaged in the process is that the plan becomes something that is, relevant to the people who it's intended to serve, City of Philomath. So we do want to encourage participation, and cost share is kind of it's a double benefit. You can show your sort of financial obligation to the grant process, or to the fulfilling of the grant, as well as come up with a really solid plan by having that participation. So Chelsea and Kevin and Rich have been participating, and so they're already doing these things, and I expect we'll continue to do so. So let's see. Perhaps maybe if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you.
And yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels.
And can I note something? I just wanted to say that also Benton County, they as well, I talked to Brian Lee today, and he said that they do the cost share as well with their staff. So they don't intend to pay out anything. It's all based off their staff participating. And then this all fits into the strategic plan objectives for safe community. Once the plan is completed, it is on the website. It's on there now, the expired plan, but it's still on there. So anyone can go look at this plan. And then the updated version will come to the city council for resolution to adopt, just so everyone's aware.
Thank you. And Ms. Daniel, I have a couple of questions. I work with tribes to put these tribal hazard mitigation plans together on a regular basis. And I know there's a lot of flexibility on what you can choose to include in a hazard mitigation plan. And are you planning to incorporate not only wildfire, but also extreme low flows in the rivers, and how that might impact our water availability, or droughts, and other things like that? And then a follow-up question is, can you just confirm that this is going to be a public process the entire way, where you are going to be soliciting feedback and input from the public at multiple stages along, multiple phases along this project timeline?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll take the first question first. And drought was, identified in the previous plan and continues through in the current plan update as a hazard to be addressed. And, among the contributing factors to drought is low flow in streams and irrigation, so availability for irrigation and farm use, as well as, the contributions it makes to habitat. So yes, certainly we will take that into consideration and treat it appropriately. The hazards to be identified and the vulnerability that jurisdictions experience from those hazards, as well as the mitigating steps to take for those hazards, are all developed within the steering committee. I don't make these determinations. I'm the writer of the plan and the facilitator of the group. So it's what Chelsea and the representatives from the city of Philomath put forward. And they are, it's incumbent upon them to seek guidance from folks like yourselves. So what you think they bring to the meeting, the concerns that you have and the issues that you want to raise, they bring to the meetings, and we therefore then incorporate those into the plan. In terms of public engagement, yes, most definitely. We're in the process of developing public engagement strategy and identifying the ways and times that we will bring the work of the steering committee to the public. So that's certainly something required by FEMA, but more importantly, it's critical for making the plan something that the folks it's intended to serve feel included and have their voices heard within.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Ms. Daniels? Councilor Nielsen?
Yeah, Chelsea, this is for Chelsea. Chelsea, you're listed as a project contact. Are you also, it mentions the steering committee having at least one representative from the city. Are you on the steering committee as well?
I am. So Gary Black, Kevin Peer, and I have all been participating in the steering committee, and Rich Salsa. So all four of us for the community have been at the meetings.
Excellent, thank you. And I saw Councilor Andrade's hand up.
Yeah, two questions. I might have missed this in the report, but for the steering committee, is that supposed to be like city staff, city officials, as opposed to like, is it normal for it to be solely people in those positions, or do you often or sometimes get community members as representatives?
That
Like
question is for me.
Yeah, like non-elected, non-appointed
Yeah,
people.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We often include, generally, they're not necessarily members of the public, but they're folks who represent groups of people. So, for example, I've worked with I call them non-governmental organizations. They're private nonprofits, right? Who represent farming and forest interests. I've worked included within steering committees, representatives of public health organizations. The steering committee is not an exclusive group. So if you have a recommendation for a public interest group or some non-elected officials who represent others, we're certainly open to that.
Okay.
And you should pass that through Chelsea or others.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then the other question was, I heard you say something about you're checking on the reservoir or water treatment plant. Was that the previous, or I guess, could you clarify what you were saying?
So oftentimes when you're doing, when I've done updates to natural hazard mitigation plans, I find that some of the actions, the mitigation actions that were identified in the previous plan are either underway or done. And so I was just skimming through the previous plan to see whether those projects were somehow identified there, but they were not. So.
Okay. Is that something that we should, I mean, it seems to me like that might be something, is that something to ask like Chelsea and Kevin and Gary to bring to you, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure the purpose of reconstructing, or I'm not quite sure of the purpose of that project, but it may very well have something to do with mitigation of a natural hazard. Maybe it's because the water system is old and needs replacing. That's a common thing. Sometimes when that's the case, a wastewater system or water system needs replacing, the consideration that we discuss within the NHMP update is how to make it resilient to earthquake hazards, or, I'm picking on the water and wastewater systems because that, flexible joints and things like that will allow them to function following an earthquake. So we sometimes identify actions to include such resiliency factors within upgrades to water and wastewater treatment plants.
Thank you. And then I guess for staff as a follow-up is that I don't know what staff has talked about with regards to the water treatment plant and the reservoir concerning, you know, making sure that I know that we've talked about earthquake safety measures and stuff, and like we know that it's in the flooding zone, and like, is that something to bring to this conversation?
Yeah, potentially, sure.
Yeah, so if you have anything, Jessica, or anyone else that you want to talk about like that, reach out to me, phone, email. I think that the reservoir, the water plant, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, that is part, I mean, it's not the whole reason we needed to upgrade capacity, but that is a positive effect of upgrading our capacity is that it can potentially help in emergencies. And it is built to new standards for, you know, resiliency in natural disasters. So I think in this case, it wasn't necessarily in the plan, but it was something that the city over time identified as needing to be replaced and upgraded for multiple reasons. So I think, yeah.
I guess I wasn't quite sure what exactly, if the plan also involves like making sure that that certain things are taken into consideration with the building of the water treatment plant and the reservoir, as opposed to this is a thing and building a new water treatment plant and reservoir is going to be the thing that will help mitigate that concern. So like I said, I don't quite know what the full context of how this plan works necessarily, but if you think that it's something worthwhile to put in there, I mean, I would like to know.
Yeah, and if you, we have a link to the Benton County Emergency Management on our website. They have this plan. If we don't have it on our website, they definitely have the plan on their website. So if you look at it, you can see exactly how it's laid out, identifying hazards, listing potential mitigation efforts, you know, things like that, updates. This update will talk about any updates that have happened. So it's helpful to look at that.
Thank you. And then Councilor Kazi. And then Councilor Nielsen.
I understand from your comments earlier that the steering committee has been meeting and undertaking some activities, but I also know that there are deliverables that were due dating back to May. Are we getting a late start with this, or are we on schedule, or?
No, we're on schedule.
Seeing this now, if it was supposed to start in or before.
Well, you'll see that some of the deliverables that were due in May had to do with developing the steering committee roster and having initial meetings with the steering committee to, you know, work through preliminary processes. So we're not late at all. This is right on time.
It's been going for a little while. This is just when the MOU, Catherine's process now is getting days out for the cities to sign them. So things have been progressing, but this is the step that we're at now.
Can I make a motion? I move that the city council approve and sign resolution 2211.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion made by Councilor Nielsen and second by Councilor Lowe. Did you want to speak to the motion, or?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Thank you. I saw Councilor Bisco's hand up.
Great. So thank you, Catherine, for providing this information, and Chelsea also. I have similar question to Councilor Kazi's, which is looking at those deliverables. This is the agreement before us right now. Will those deliverables be updated then in this agreement before signature, or will they, like the scope of work, for example, that would be relevant to be updated? The communications plan seems important to have updated before we are signing off on this agreement. And I too would ask why this is the first time that we've been aware of this process going on. I think it would have been helpful to have a little bit more advance notice than just this packet. So can you speak to those, either Chelsea or Catherine, those deliverable timelines in that contract before it's signed?
Well, I can speak to just the timing of it. I just got involved with this at the last meeting. So the last meeting, Catherine, when was the last meeting that we had?
Mhm.
Weeks ago, I think that was the first meeting that I went to and attended.
Yeah.
Historically, I think Public Works has been primarily attending these meetings, but because of my emergency management background, I'm sitting in on them to kind of get a different perspective. And I can't speak to the exact scope of work and where we are in the, it looks like you're asking about the communication plan specifically.
So there are several tasks in here that are identified, as Councilor Causey mentioned, with target dates. My question is just, will those dates be updated? Will the scope of work, communications plan, and some of the other contents that are in here tied to those deliverables with dates that we've already passed, will those be updated before this intergovernmental agreement is signed?
I can certainly take a look and see whether those dates reflect the schedule that we laid out. But in my recollection, I don't believe that we've passed any of the deliverables.
And just also to be clear, Benton County is primarily who Catherine works with. That's who's overseeing the whole plan. These are sub-IGAs within the larger plan. Just we have essentially an addendum or chapter in the overall Benton County plan.
Thank you. Councilor Causey? I'm sorry, Jim.
My thought would be, if staff has been participating and part of your in-kind contribution is staff participation, it might be a good thing to have some kind of recognition that, yep, these things have been done. That was part of our participation, and that's part of the in-kind contribution that the city makes.
Right, and we are tracking, all of us on city staff are tracking all of our meeting time, anytime that we're, you know, I called Brian Lee today and talked about it, so we're tracking all of that too.
Thank you. Councilor Causey?
So to clarify, the 25% cost share, is that exclusively through in-kind contributions, or are there any cash contributions?
That's our intention, and when I spoke with Brian Lee earlier at Benton County, he said that Benton County exclusively, it's all staff, and that he has not seen any cities contributing cash. The intent, I think, as Catherine said, is that you are participating, and that's what they want to see. They don't want our cash. They don't want our cash in this case, just to participate in the plan.
Thank you. And then we have Councilor Andrade.
Yeah, yeah, thank you again for all of this information. It sounds really great. And then to clarify, so I know, Chelsea, you said that you got involved at this last meeting, but it sounded like there had been discussions, and normally this happens through Public Works people. Does that mean that it was talked about in the Public Works Committee meeting? It's just agreed with the whole sentiment of, it feels odd that we haven't had a report from the committee, or just that, you know, it's just come to the council now after the fact, that it's been formed. But could you elaborate on that, please?
I can just say that my experience in other cities is that there are city staff members that are assigned to these steering committees, and then there's public participation as welcome. I believe, Catherine, the meetings they can get information from you if they're interested in the meetings that are happening. I can't say as to what happened before I got news of this. It really is just, we just had our first substantial meeting where we talked about anything. Like Catherine said, it's been kind of getting people together, deciding who's going to be on the steering committee.
I understand. I meant more so like, has the topic been brought like to the Public Works Committee saying, hey, this is a thing that the county's doing, and like.
I will say that historically, these plans are not brought to the city council until the plan is finished, and then we bring you a resolution to adopt the chapter for the plan essentially. So it's not unusual, the process, the way it's flowing. That's not to say that it can't change, but it's not unusual.
Okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know. I wasn't sure.
Can I just add, if you don't mind? Yeah, I encourage the members of the steering committees that I work with to keep their elected officials informed, monthly or quarterly, certainly. It often takes us a year to work through the entire process. So, any concerns that you may have that the city of Philomath is late to the table should be allayed, because certainly you're not, and we're quite at the beginning of the process. I like to take a substantial amount of time to lay a firm groundwork so that we understand, what we're dealing with, and the folks in the steering committee have a chance to convey that information back to folks like yourselves, so that everybody is kind of coming along at the same, on the same topics. And as we go through the process of updating the NHMP, the folks who represent the city of Philomath will bring information back to you so that you can react, and we can incorporate that information into the plan.
Thank you. So I see Councilor Lowe, then I see Councilor Lehman, then I see Councilor Causey, and then Councilor Bisco.
Well, good. So anyway, personally, I think this is fine. I don't think we're behind anything. I think the representation of the city manager, city council relationship, where we expect staff to be doing things behind the scenes. Personally, I don't expect to be informed of every single thing ahead of time. I think it's happening in the flow of the process. We're at that point where we hear about it. I'm perfectly happy with how it's going, and I see nothing wrong, and I think we should move on.
Councilor Lehman?
Yeah, I was wondering if I could get a description of what the public side of this is going to be like. I'm assuming we haven't gotten to any stage where there's going to be public involvement, although it's been mentioned several times. It doesn't seem like anybody in this room knew anything about it before today or before we got our packets. So I'm just wondering what the public interaction phase of this project looks like.
Well, I think that would be a Catherine question. I don't know what they have planned on their end for that. Like I said, we are participants, so we do have our own community to engage with, but we're taking the lead from Benton County. So I don't know where they are, their public engagement. Catherine, can you speak to that part of
Yeah, of course. So we've had 2 meetings of the steering committee so far, and during the first meeting, I laid out for the attendees what you see in the scope of work, and what the process will be, and discussed with them the responsibilities of all parties. And during the second steering committee meeting on the 21st of July, we began to broach the topic of public engagement. So we have not yet developed a public engagement strategy that is, something that's a whole document. We've been talking about the ways in which the various cities and districts involved in the plan could do public engagement. So now is the perfect opportunity for your ideas to come forth through the representatives of the city, Chelsea and et al., if you will. And we would love to incorporate your ideas into our public engagement strategy.
Thank you. Thank you. And Councilor Causey?
I just wanted to, when you say the steering committee, when you most recently met with the steering committee, are you speaking of the Philomath City or the entire county?
Entire county, right? So it's
Okay,
Benton County, all the communities in the county.
okay.
That are participants.
So the work that has taken place is at the county level, is that correct?
Yes, so the, Brian Lee is the county facilitator. He is there, but he runs the meetings in conjunction with Catherine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then Councilor Biscoe.
So just a couple clarifiers on this agreement. It is a contract. And so I just wanted, first, I would feel better if we updated those deliverables because they're out of sync with what we're being asked to sign tonight somewhat. And it is an agreement with the state agency. But I do want to point out also that the steering committee members, so this is, it's letter H, but let me find task 4, letter H. So steering committee members and alternates must have or have been delegated authority to make decisions and act on behalf of their jurisdictions, departments, or organizations for the purposes of this project. So if I read that correctly, we may not necessarily get updates. That's just a best practices ask. Is that a fair assessment based on this agreement?
You won't get updates from Catherine if that's what you're asking, but I can give you updates if there's an update that you want, like quarterly. I can give updates, but it won't probably be coming from Catherine. I mean, Catherine, I'm sure would answer questions, but like I said, she is working through the county, so it would probably be better if you came to me and then I can get answers.
So I guess I would ask that maybe we get those updates because any hazard mitigation plan isn't going to operate in that void of space where only public works is involved. Should we have reason to implement this planning either on the backside, it might be helpful for us to at least get some summary update. The list of stakeholders. So this document also says it's task 4, letter I. The list must include at a minimum representation, representatives of the following sectors: emergency management, economic development, land use and development, housing, health and social services, infrastructure, including transportation and other community lifelines, and natural and cultural resources. So I'm hoping that our county our steering committee covers all of those things, but I'd be interested in seeing what the what the steering committee membership list looks like as well. Clearly, this is a bigger document than just public works, I guess, is where I'm trying to land the conversation. Since
Well, my participation is the non-public works participation, I think, to facilitate the.
So I'll be
the
clear
administration.
in that I don't know that you and our public works can represent economic development, land use and development, housing, health and social services, which is why I'm just asking to make sure that we know what that steering committee membership looks like.
Sure, and I can get a list from Catherine
That'd be
and
great.
pass that on to you.
So with that, seeing no further comments, questions, go ahead and call a question. All in favor of passing the resolution as stated, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for that. And thank you, Ms. Danielle. Appreciate you being here tonight and for you answering some of our questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Next, we have Ordinance 867. And we have first reading.
Thank you. This is an ordinance amending the comprehensive plan as adopted by Ordinance 493 and amended by Ordinance 720 to approve and adopt Chapter 3 Housing.
Excellent. Thank you. So, were there any proposed edits, or we can go ahead and get started with a roll call vote? Roll call vote.
Catherine Biscoe. Yes. Ruth Causey.
Yes,
Matt Lehman.
Yes.
David Lowe.
Yes.
Teresa Nielsen.
Yes.
Jessica Andrade.
Yes.
And Chad Jones.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for that. Next, we'll have a first reading of Ordinance 868.
And this is an ordinance amending the comprehensive plan as adopted by ordinance 493 and amended by ordinance 720 to approve and adopt chapter 2 economy.
Thank you. With that, any proposed edits? Seeing none, go ahead and get started with a roll call vote.
So I just have a
Go ahead, Counselor Bisco.
question, trying to find it in the document here. It's the chapter 3 housing, page 1 of 4, so it's right after the ordinance page. Under context.
Page 1 of 5.
Excuse me, it says page, oh, that's housing, pardon me, I'm looking at the economics one, yeah, that was right. All right, under context, so page 1 of 5, chapter 2 economy, after the page of ordinance number 868. In reviewing this, just taking, another look through some of these things, I'm hoping just for clarification. I don't know if I was getting different information in this packet than what I was getting from the city website, but I was looking at the economic opportunities analysis that we approved to attach to our comprehensive plan. And I found that on lines 17 through 23, there are differences in the numbers, which I thought was odd because I'm assuming these are data-driven numbers. So the context is the summary of the economic opportunities analysis provides the following context: 176 new jobs, 82 in office and commercial services, 57 of these in industrial, et cetera, 5.3 gross acres. So one of the other documents I was reading had different numbers, and I'm just wondering if there is either something not updated on the website or if this information is different information. I just was hoping for some clarity, not saying that there was an error somewhere necessarily, but there's an inconsistency in the information.
And could you tell us where that's found? I read this, but the document you found, where is that listed?
So it is on the city website. It is the 2021-2041 Economic Opportunities Analysis adopted on February 2021. And just again, going back and
Is there a
comparing
page
these
number?
two, I'll find it in a second here for you in a moment. Mostly just hoping for clarification of if one is an updated version, that's great, but.
Chris was used. The intention was to use that as this data source.
Yeah, these numbers should be coming out of what was adopted in the house or the economic opportunities analysis. So if that wasn't right, we can just hold off on this and
I
get it
have
updated
this
and bring it
up,
back.
but I don't have this up, so.
Lines 17 to 23 is there over.
Yeah, it's just that context section right there, and
So
it's not super big.
Well,
enough,
maybe we
so-
could postpone this.
Yeah, we'll just, I'll have to look and I can't look at it on the spot. I'll have to look at it and bring it back.
We can, yeah, is everybody okay with moving on and just come back to this?
Yeah. So actually, I have it.
So can I ask for
So,
clarification?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is are we backing away from approval of the ordinance, or is the ordinance approved?
Wait,
Because you're editing the document that is attached to the ordinance that you just voted on, correct?
no, there was a clarification on that. The start was with housing, but that got quickly corrected. No, it's the
Correct.
economic development.
Oh, okay, okay.
So we're in the
I'm
right.
sorry.
one.
Okay, yeah. you
What I
lost me
can
there.
do is I'll go back and look for that because I think it's just an inconsistency between a document and an update perhaps. I just want to make sure we have the right information for here.
That's fine. So we'll just postpone this for now. And I don't know, are we proposing that staff will look at that tonight or at a later meeting? After the meeting?
It's probably gonna require double checking.
Okay. No problem. We'll do that next meeting.
What time are we at? We can take a break. I can take a look at it real quick.
It's 8 o'clock. Want to go
We'll take a recess. And
5-minute
take a
break?
look at it.
Okay, we can take a 5-minute break. Come back at 8:08.
So this looks the same to me. Conclusions of the economic opportunities analysis. This is similar.
version.
It's just not fair.
It is not fair. We're always like,
I hope
let's do their lunch dinner, or if we share.
That's how we're
Where,
using my
where that kind of.
As we charge you.
Okay, all right, all. Thank you for that. We'll call the meeting back to order. And it looks like we have an update. Council Bisco, did you want to?
Yes, I do. So just to get everybody up to speed, when we're looking at it, it could be an older cached version. And that with the approved document, that it looks like the one that is on the city website, that is the most recent version, does reflect these numbers right here. So we're good to go to move forward with that one, then that helps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll go ahead and have a roll call vote on ordinance 868.
Catherine Disco,
Yes.
Ruth Cozy,
Yes,
Matt Leaman,
Yes.
David Lowe,
Yes.
Teresa Nielsen,
Yes.
Jessica Andrade,
Yes.
Charles Jones.
Yes, excellent. Thank you for that. Next, we have ordinance 869, and this is new. So do we have city staff that can help talk to us about this?
I can address it just briefly. I included an agenda item summary just to give a little background here. This is for Alyrica Networks. This is a new franchise. When I've mentioned that to people are like, they don't have a franchise agreement yet. They don't. Everything that they've done up to this point is been without having to be in the public right of way. They've moved over to using fiber now. They've done that in City of Halsey, City of Brownsville. They're looking to install fiber and have installed fiber in City of Philomath. And so they're going to be in public right of way going forward. So we require them to enter into this franchise agreement. That gives them access to put utilities in the public right of way, but with that, they have to pay a franchise fee, which is a percentage of their gross sales within the City of Philomath. So we'll be collecting money monthly. There's a minimum monthly fee for the first couple of years. It ramps up year 2. And then by year 3, it goes to, whatever is greater. Either I think it's $350 or 7%. 7% is the max that the state allows us to charge for telecommunications franchise fees. And that's what we collect for others. So we want to treat all of our telecommunications franchisees equally and fairly and without any kind of burdens to entry. So City Attorney's Office has reviewed this and given it a thumbs up and recommend that the council go ahead and approve this ordinance and put this franchise in place. No emergency clause. They've got people jumping at the bit to get started, but I've said we're waiting 30 days effective because we don't want any issues for obvious reasons. So this will be effective September 8th or September 9th, I think, but September 9th of next month.
If it's unanimous.
If it's unanimous tonight. If not, then we'll bring it up again next month and it'll be a couple months out. But they would like to get some of their businesses signed up.
And did you, can you clarify, is this something we customized for Alyrica? Is this boilerplate language for the most part?
Both. It's boilerplate, but I would say the telecommunications franchise got updated. The old one had some older language. It didn't include the provisions for ramping up, which I think I don't know, this could be considered as a barrier to entry for some telecommunications type companies like Alyrica. So I think this format is good, but this will be like our standard document going forward. But it is updated from recent versions of this document.
I have a question, please. Is it typical that there's a graduated fee schedule like first year, second year, third year? Is that typical or is that something just with Alyrica that we're doing?
That's new for the franchise fee agreement, but it'll be implemented for all of them going forward.
Okay.
It reduces a barrier to entry that smaller companies would have.
Okay. Thank you.
And part of our requirement under federal law is to have no barriers to entry.
Thank you. I appreciate
I
that.
think it makes us more compliant with federal law.
Councilor?
Wouldn't that be though, if you're going in fresh, you have not used the public infrastructure before, you're now wanting to do it, so if you're starting from 0 and ramping up, then you have this fee, graduated fee.
That's correct.
Yeah, and that's, again, the first year it's $100 a month. Not only having the franchise fee allows you to be in that public right of way, but there's also some expenses on the city's part. Anytime there's a construction project, we notify all of the franchisees, hey, there's a construction project, come to the meeting, see what the project is. So there's a little bit of benefit that you have of having the franchise agreement, that we're going to contact you when there's a project and it's in the right of way, that you've got the right to come to that meeting then and voice any concerns, give input into design elements, those types of things. So you do get some benefits outside of just getting to use the right of way. You also get some benefits of some of those design meetings, which could be very beneficial.
I'd like to, so there's more discussion, but I'd like to make a motion to approve the franchise agreement with Alyrica Networks as presented.
It'll be an ordinance, so we will call it, but
Sorry.
the motion is well noted.
Okay.
And we have Counselor Lehman, you hand up?
Are you waiting for a second? Or-
Oh, no, we're actually,
No,
we don't need a
Oh,
motion.
It is actually an ordinance.
Okay, perfect.
I jumped the
I
gun.
do have a question. Is this primarily for commercial use, or is it just basically our friends at Pioneer just got basically done doing this and now Alyrica wants to do the same thing? Is that,
Yeah, so our role isn't to pick winners or losers. It's non-exclusive.
Yep.
And so it gives them the right to compete on the open market and using the public right of way. So yes, Pioneer just did a big upgrade of their fiber network. They have a franchise agreement that allows them to be in the public right of way. So all of that work that they've done, all the work that Public Works has done and doing locates and all that stuff, they get the benefit of that because they have the franchise agreement. This would allow Alyrica that same opportunity, yes.
Counselor Causey?
Couple of questions. One, how are those minimum amounts determined?
I got them from the city attorney's office.
It was arbitrary,
Seriously?
seriously.
Okay, well, thank you for your candor, Council. If you could clarify, section 2.1 seems to allow for construction both above ground and underground.
Yes.
And section 3.8 requires underground.
I had the same question. Thank you for bringing that up.
But you'll also see in 3.8 that nothing in that requires them to underground any ground mounted appurtenances. So they may have furniture, what you would call cabinets and those kinds of things that are going to be above ground, and they might have antennas on top of poles.
Okay. I ask this because I know there is an interest in underground utilities. So would this agreement be interpreted as requiring underground transmission lines? If not, could it be changed to do so?
It could be changed to do so if that is going to be the same requirement that you have for all other telecommunications services.
Moving forward, or?
Yes, moving forward, yeah. Again, you can't have a barrier to entry where this service has to do something that another service doesn't have to do.
Just to add to that, in practice, if a telecommunications company is installing or doing work within the right of way, say it's a vacant lot or a lot that's been partitioned, they're putting a new home in. If all of the other communications there is above ground, we've allowed them to continue that above ground use and to go ahead and do above ground for that fill-in house or the flag lot house or whatever it is, rather than install a whole new underground system to service that one property, which would be the one property in the whole neighborhood that has underground service. And so we have allowed overhead service to continue if the rest of the neighborhood is overhead. If it's new service or it's an area where the rest of the service is underground, all of that new service has to be underground. So,
But I take your point, and that is something that we should, if that's going to be the standard, and we don't want to be forced one way or the other, then we ought to have that in the agreement.
Thank you.
Wait, sorry.
Yeah, just to follow on to that, because I'm very interested in looking at utilities being underground moving forward. What would be a responsible thing to do for other franchise holders if we decide that this is the cutoff point and moving forward, our franchisees will all be required to do underground? How would we responsibly handle that as a council?
We could do it by date. That service being provided to new locations after September 2022 must be underground. If service is already existing above ground, we don't care who's providing a service there, it can be above ground. That would be one way to do it.
I believe we have public works design standards that require that utilities be placed underground.
So we could
So
reference
that would,
those
any new
as of the-
development would be required to.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to point back to, a franchise agreement that would contradict it.
So I think we can, I think it is something that we can incorporate into the agreement, we just haven't. And so if that means we need to bring it back in another month, let's do that. And we'll add some language and get it in front of you.
Would that not have to be stipulated in the municipal code? Or is it stipulated in
The design standards are referenced in the development portion of the code,
Okay.
but since they change from time to time, they're not.
Councilor?
My question isn't quite as critical, but it's odd that under the fee section, it's talking about paying the fee solely through the US mail, which is very antiquated. It would seem like we should allow ACH. Is it necessary to stipulate this through the US mail?
I suspect that language is there to make sure that people didn't drop checks in a box someplace and the city never knows them.
But it doesn't preclude ACH or some other.
It actually does, so.
Oh, it does.
But again, this is that hybrid between language that the city's long had and an update. And so that would be something we could update as well.
Would we want to touch base with Alyrica, find out like what the difference in cost would be for underground versus status quo, or is it just something we would just decide and move forward?
No, to me, I think, again, the city standard is that all new utilities are underground.
And so we should be consistent.
And we
with
should
that
be consistent
in
there.
both places in the agreement. Okay.
But where, I'm just not seeing, where is it in the agreement that it says that they could be above ground other than the cabinets and the stuff that kind of has to be above ground? I'm not seeing where there's.
section 2.1 about 6 lines down?
Yep.
Such facilities may be strung upon poles or other fixtures above ground, or at the option of the grantee, its successors and assigns may be laid underground.
So we should change grantee to grantor.
Well, there's that. Well, I think we need to bring that back, but I think we take your point that that's a good fix to have in here and would be good going forward with other providers too.
Councilor, any other?
I do, and it's about the fee schedule or the ramp up thing. Like the first year is $100 a month. And I'm having a hard time imagining you could even do one locate job for the Public Works Department for $100. So I'm just wondering if it's in the best interest of the city to basically subsidize all the locate tasks around this utility for the first year, if we're anticipating that over the life of the franchise, we're going to get to a point where that's going to be made up, or is that not the goal?
I think that what we were looking at was the number of accounts that they had and what their income would be at the 7%. And that it was going to be less than $100 a month, presumably for about a year.
Right, and I understand what you're saying on the one side of the equation. On the other side of the equation, let's say they add 20 subs next month, that's 20 locates, that's staff time and equipment that's going to far exceed the $200.
So for the first few years where those are a low fixed rate, do we add to that and any actual costs of the city?
That, I guess that's my question, right? But then I understand your barrier to entry thing,
Well, that's an actual cost.
but it's
though,
a,
so
it's a
so-
hard cost. That's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's my concern, is that we're not gonna come close to covering the hard cost of this franchise until the third or even the fourth or fifth year.
I believe the current, or the previous version of this, I believe that minimum monthly payment was $750 a month, period, and there was no ramping up. And so, in talking with Alyrica, that $750 a month to them felt like we were precluding them from entering the market at paying $700 a month every month, regardless of how many new customers they had. So it wasn't totally arbitrary. It was like, okay, something less than $750 a month, what do you ramp it up to from there? And so that's where we dropped that down to give that, to not give the illusion that we were creating a barrier to entry. So, your point's good though on a number of those, but I
I
guess.
think it's pretty easy to say $100 a month plus any actual cost of the city.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the tracking of that then puts the onus on the city to be tracking this and how much money we're gonna spend to track plus costs.
Increase the admin fee.
A utility locate, not to minimize it, but
Back to $750 a month.
Yeah.
3 locates on a street, you're talking half an hour, 40 minutes to go out and do 3 locates, so. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the 100, I'm not married to it, but I wouldn't necessarily want to put the owners back on city staff to be tracking actual expenses of doing all of these, because I think we'll lose more money by tracking than what we'll gain in.
But I think the inverse is probably what I'm thinking, is if they are gonna go out and do a big push to get subscribers, because that, obviously that's what they're gonna do. We're gonna see them getting subscribers, and it's gonna cost the city a substantial amount of money and resources to facilitate them putting that in, and I don't think the $100 is gonna cover it. And I don't wanna create a barrier to entry, but if the actual cost of doing the install is a barrier to entry, then I think they have a bad business plan, and maybe they shouldn't be doing it to begin with.
Oh, I think that's in marketing. So we're not that far off.
Could we do like $100 an hour or $100 per locate, or $50 per location?
We just change that to
It's
200.
more than just the locate. Again, you're talking staff time to invite them to meetings, or talking staff time to coordinate with them on locations. We're talking review of locations of where things are going. So it's much more than just the locate in the ground. It's,
I'm trying to do something easy to track.
that first year, there's a lot of time and money that's going into putting the fiber in before anybody can even connect to it. And so, we've seen that with the Pioneer project. They've spent months getting the fiber installed, and I can guarantee you they're not making their money back on new connections that we're going out there and doing locates on. Sure, that'll be a long process over many, many years. So, is $100 too low, I guess is the question. I mean, if we're talking about just up in that number a little bit, but again, I'd caution us from putting it back on city staff to try to be tracking that anyway. Maybe just raise that flat fee up if you don't feel $100 is sufficient.
Councilor Bisco?
Yeah, just so I'm clear, before we made this change to the franchise agreement, what was the cost?
It's $750 a
So
month.
it was
minimum, or
$750.
7%, whatever was greater.
Greater. And so Pioneer, for example, paid that $750 a month right off the bat.
I wasn't here when Pioneer started their franchise, so I don't know what it was at the time. But the most recent agreement with Pioneer had that $750 a month or 7%, whatever was lower.
It would be the 7%.
Right.
And that agreement
Higher.
was when,
Yeah, it was before I got here. So
Probably as soon as franchise agreements began.
the dawn of franchising.
And Councilor Causey?
Section 6.3 refers to bonds or other surety. When would a bond or other surety be required?
If, for example, because of something that they wanted to do in the right of way, we knew that their construction in the right of way to put everything back was going to cost a substantial amount of money, we'd want a bond for that.
And
If they became very late on making franchise payments, we might want a bond as part of a workout on something like that.
okay. And will you be negotiating this with Alyrica? I assume they have an opportunity to request changes.
Well, you really, it's your right of way.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we'd negotiate. I mean, they've reviewed this document and I've asked them if they had any concerns about it, that they could bring that up at this meeting. And they opted to not be here and said, we're good with it. Let us know if council approves it. So I mean, they've seen it, they've reviewed it, but I wouldn't say we're negotiating with them. It's, as Brewer said, it's our right of way, it's our agreement. But we just need to be consistent.
My last question, do you know if it would be possible for them to share infrastructure with Pioneer Connect? Or do we get to have our streets dug up all over again?
No, I believe it's possible. I don't know if that's their business model, but you know, there are other networks that share fiber streams and cell towers and all those things. So I'm sure it's possible.
So you would like as much co-location as possible.
Well, not necessarily, but it seems pretty wasteful to go through that all over again. But I'm sure they thought of that.
Councilor Visco?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can go back to Council Brewer had shared about the state's requirements of having that no barrier, and this is just a low barrier proposal.
It's a federal law, the Federal Telecommunications Act. You are supposed to, well, we're required not to have barriers to entry in order to help with competition. What that means exactly, there's a considerable difference between local governments who feel like we have this right of way, we're regulating it, the public often has paid for it, and industry that says, yes, thank you for providing that. And so what exactly is a barrier to entry is a topic of some discussion.
Okay, and so just to clarify, then they are suggesting no barrier. We are looking at low barrier, and no matter what we decide here, we would not want to be revising this policy after this decision tonight.
That's right.
So
You
this
want
is
to have
not,
consistency.
so this is not just an Alyrica policy decision. It's every telecommunications that might come afterwards as
That's
well.
correct.
And
Which
do
is
you,
part of why the city manager is saying, well, you're not really negotiating it, because we can't really give preferred terms to any one telecommunications provider.
and do you consider $100, the scale that we have built in here, to fall under that Federal Telecommunications Act of low barrier or no barrier?
It would, it is reducing a barrier to entry. Whether it is too low, I can't tell you that. Certainly smaller companies, a starting franchise fee for smaller companies that's the same as for Xfinity or Verizon. They're dealing at a different scale, and unfortunately, you do have to treat them both the same.
Councilor Andrade?
On the, I have a couple questions. I guess the first one, I might have misheard something, but I thought I heard Chris say something about the most recent agreement with Pioneer. Was that just the most recent franchise agreement? Or do these get updated every so often? Like like re like they have to sign every 5 years or something like that?
Yeah, they have terms written into them. Often those terms can be extended out without review, and then you've got to give notice if either party wants to review. Again, I'd have to go back and look at the specifics on and calendars on when different franchises expire.
Okay, and so then moving forward, we would have that same time period then for every re-up, I guess, of a franchise agreement with any particular telecommunications company. Okay, cool. And then the other question, thank you for that. The other question had to do with what Council Brewer was just saying about not treating the larger telecommunication companies and the smaller telecommunication companies differently. Does it have to be a flat rate, or can you still normalize it to like the size of the company? Or where it's like, if you have this size of a company, the first year they have to pay this amount. Whereas if you have a company that's less than that, smaller than that, then you pay this amount, so that you scale the barrier accordingly, or the
Yeah,
no barrier or whatever.
work it off a percentage of gross revenue, which is the 7% that you see.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't, but the question then is, would that 7% cover your hard costs? If it's such a small company and you're still doing lots of locates and lots of other things, and 7% is, less than $1 or in a particular month, or $70.
Yeah, no, I guess what I mean is like scaling, like I said, scaling it to the size of the company, or like the number of accounts that they have, or something like that, where it's like, if you have over, let's just say 100 for now, because I don't have a good guess for how many customers a given company would have. Like if you have over 100 customers, then you pay this amount, or like with that scale up that you have. And then if you have something that is less than that, you have less than 100 customers, then you end up paying this scale, which is more manageable for this company, for this size company, based on like, their profits and stuff. Did I explain that okay?
I think so. So what I don't think that you could do I don't think you could do it by number of customers or number of accounts. I think it really has to be monetized one way or the other, that it's either you pay this flat amount unless 7%, and 7 is the maximum that you're pretty much allowed, unless 7% is greater than that, and then we want the greater. I don't think that you could. I think that the statute is intended in some ways to encourage permission, or competition, but it's also heavily weighted towards large industry players.
Yeah. Okay.
We could do 1%, or we could do 0.5%, but
yeah.
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
But then you're not paying your own costs at that point.
The no barrier franchise fees feels a little bit subjective to me as we're hearing it, and reducing it from $750 a month to our new idea of 100, then 200, then 350. That's quite a cut, and I worry about those hard costs. So you said that we as a council could reconsider and say we're more comfortable with maybe a 200, 300, and a 400. fee schedule rather than the 1, 2, and 350? Is that what I'm understanding? Or are you saying that's not a possibility?
No, that is a possibility. You could go back to 750 and say that's where it ought to be.
But even at the 2, 3, and 4, that still is less than the 750 that we were initially previously.
But as long as you're treating everybody the same going forward, then that's not going to
And
be a
that would give
problem.
us maybe a little more leeway to cover those hard costs consecutively, maybe a work with
And you might
security.
have a few more smaller parties come to your community and try to offer the
Right.
service.
Okay, so that's fine. So would I have to propose that? A motion to change that, or how would I do that if I wanted to do it?
A motion would be ideal because that would give us direction on what to bring back to you.
Then I would like to make a motion that we change the fee schedule from 100 per month the first year to 200 per month the first year, then increasing to 300 a month the second year, if that makes sense. And then the fourth year going to $400 or the 7% as the state allows, capitalize. Just to cover hard costs if there be any, so that our city and our constituents and community members don't have staff and city money utilized ineffectively.
Second.
So we have a motion made by Councilor Nielsen and seconded by Councilor Lehman. Any further, would you like to speak to the motion? Or are you
No,
good?
okay.
Any further discussion? Councilor Cosby.
I'd just like to suggest an amendment to the motion to increase it to 250, 500, and 750, so we attain the previous level ultimately.
Is there a second?
So we have a
Motion to amend the motion is what I heard.
Can I ask a question regarding that? Would that be inappropriate?
Sure.
That no barrier, I am understanding that we want to have businesses come in of all levels and not be too restrictive where that would be the case. That's my only concern. I want to make sure that we offer smaller franchises the opportunity to grow in our community and participate. So I guess I'm asking, what's the opinion of the staff in regards to that higher franchise fee? That's appropriate to ask. In regards to no barrier thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on the no barrier. To me, I'm going off of discussions that I had with Alyrica, their concerns about entering the market, their concerns about $750 a month, specifically to what they could spend $750 a month on if they weren't just paying it to the city for a franchise fee. You know, additional fiber in the ground, additional antennas they could put up, all those types of things. And so for them, I will say this has been in the works since Amy was here, so 3 years that they've been dabbling with the idea of entering into a franchise agreement with the city, and they've not because of the higher $750 a month barrier that they felt for them, and it's just the one business they felt was a barrier to enter for them to enter the Plymouth market. I can tell you, I'm just trying to give you information, I can tell you that after having initial conversations with me on what the existing at the time the franchise agreement was, they went to City of Halsey and they installed fiber in all of Halsey and had entered a franchise agreement with them. They've also got a franchise agreement with the City of Brownsville, and they've installed fiber in Brownsville. They're in Philomath. They've not installed fiber in Philomath other than through private property to get to Boulevard Apartments through private property without being a public right of way. And it's only now, I think as Landmark Drive is going in, they've got some customers there that they go, it's only now that they're saying, okay, now we'll bite the bullet into the franchise agreement. And again, continue to work on what would that franchise agreement look like? Can we, is there, you know, can we update, can we revise it? That's where the city attorney's office came back and said, well, if you did a first year, second year, third year tier, I would come back. And again, they didn't come back with any comments or concerns about the way this was laid out. So I don't want to suppose that if these numbers go up, then they're going to back away and not want to do the franchise agreement. But I can tell you that that was their line of thinking, I guess, as I've had discussions with them about what those initial costs per month would be for them starting.
Councilor Lehman.
I have two questions. First, do you know what the franchise fees are in Halsey and Brownsville?
I believe in Halsey, they actually did a service in lieu of franchise, so they provide the city, fire and whatever with free internet service or with internet service in exchange for the franchise. I don't know what the agreement in Brownsville was, but I do know it's the agreement in Halsey. So I don't think there's cash or a minimum. I think it's a service in lieu of the 7%.
Gotcha. And then because it's been presented to us with the fees there, you obviously feel comfortable at the $100 per month level. Are you not anticipating a lot of work for city staff in the first year?
I don't. I mean, $1,200 for the month or for the year, for the first year. I don't want to subsidize it any, I think it's an important point. I don't want to subsidize that work that's to be done. It's hard to put a number on those hours, but in comparison's sake, again, I can tell you the amount of manpower that we've spent on the Pioneer franchise agreement, and it's substantial. And I would beg it's probably more than what we've collected in franchise fees for them for this year, but they've been a franchise for a number of years to help offset some of that. So it's just hard to do the comparison, but at $100 per month, yeah, I mean, I don't think we're gonna lose a lot of money if we lose and we break even. I think by the year 2, I'm more comfortable at that 200 level. So, if we started at the 200 there, that's gonna be more comfort for year 1. Absolutely, so I'm not opposed to bumping these up a little bit. The intent was, I believe more competition leads to lower prices for everybody. I think if there's more competition in town, that may not be the best thing for Pioneer, but maybe it is. Maybe it's the best thing for the homeowners and the business owners. So it's not exclusive. So our role is not to try to exclude people from the market. It's to not have barriers to entry by federal law. And so, if I'm hearing from a telecommunications company that's located in Philomath that $750 a month is a barrier to them entering the Philomath market, that tells me that we probably need to look at being lower, which is where I went to the city attorney and say, can we make some adjustments here so that we don't have this barrier to entry? Because that's the wording I'm hearing from them, is this is a barrier to us entering the Philomath market. And that's when it came back to 100, 200, 350. So is there room to negotiate between $100 and 750? Absolutely. I'm comfortable moving in that direction, but I would caution us from going too high too quickly, because then I do think it'll become that barrier that we're trying to avoid.
Thanks.
And we see Councilor Lowe and then Councilor Visco.
Oh, no,
Okay.
I retract.
Councilor Visco.
Just putting in perspective, so thank you to Councilor Lumen and actually Councilor Kazi, I appreciate your idea of getting us to that 750 space at the end of 3 years, which makes it more balanced with our previous franchise agreement. And maybe there's some value in that. I'm not advocating one way or the other, but at least considering that. But want to point back to the fact that we just recently approved economic development strategies that gave tax incentives to larger businesses in theory. And we were willing to take those offsets as a city in order to encourage that type of development in the community. Certainly Alyrica is a local company for us. And with their growth also comes economic development and employment and such. So is this similar in the way that we've offered those tax incentives in our policies? Is this a similar extension of that courtesy, if you will, to encourage small business development in Philomath? And does it fall into the lines of the Federal Telecommunications Act as well and reducing those barriers? I think that for Alyrica not to have developed here previously is a statement on the cost. Can we meet somewhere and can we land in this space, right, where we're allowing that offset from the city by keeping this franchise agreement where it sounds like they were comfortable?
Yeah, I understand in concept where you're going and helping encourage small businesses and local businesses to go. I think the distinction here would be with this franchise fee, what we're trying to do is avoid subsidizing by the city paying out staff time to directly support this. And we might make sure that we cover that with the, I'm assuming you're referring to the enterprise zones where we're deferring taxes for 3 years. There's no real cost to the city there that we're worried about offsetting. We're not collecting the new revenue from that tax, but we also don't have an expense on the other side where city staff is dedicating a lot of time to those. We're still collecting application fees for plan use. We're still collecting permitting fees for the buildings going up. So we don't have that expense. It's not been offset. It's just not new tax money that's coming in. I think that's a concern here is we don't want to be only collecting $100 a month if it's costing us $150 a month to be doing it. But in principle, you're correct. I think we want to have and continue to have a reputation for supporting local business and small business and large business and Philomath business of all types. So that's a good reputation to have. We want to maintain that, certainly. But again, I think having the conversation tonight shows that as a council, we do care about this issue and we don't want to be unfair with how we're treating businesses. We want to make sure that we're covering our expenses as well. So there's a balance there.
And Councilor Andrade?
Since it sounds like Council Brewer is going to be coming back with amended language regardless, Council Brewer, if you could, I would be interested in knowing more about, or staff or the Chris, what the other agreements are just in general along Councilor Lehman's earlier remarks of just like, what are these agreements like for other cities of comparable size or with, smaller telecommunications companies? Well, I guess it would be all telecommunications companies. Do they have a similar ramp up to what's being proposed here? Or do they have other mechanisms of reducing barriers for entry? And if you have that information now, that'd be cool. But if not, I would be interested in seeing that for the next time we discuss this.
And I'll just also point out that I think we're only talking like $1,200 a year total. So, even the amount of staff time that we're asking to put into this might start to offset the amount of savings that we're talking about just by having these conversations. So it's not a lot of money. I'm fine with any of the above myself, but I know that we do have to send this back.
Could we call the question then about the motion?
Yeah.
May I request a clarification?
Yeah.
Did Councilor Causey make a motion to amend?
But
Yeah,
I
Was
don't
it
think there was a
seconded?
second.
There was no second.
There's no second.
Who seconded it?
No one.
No one.
Sorry.
So, and then we have Councilor Nielsen calling the question on the original motion, which was do you want to repeat the motion?
The original motion?
The original motion is made by Councilor Nielsen to amend.
No, I don't, because I didn't actually get it in complete. I didn't get all the numbers.
I thought it was seconded, was it not?
Yeah.
Yours was. Do you mind repeating yours?
What I got was
Councilor?
to change the fee schedule from 100 to 200 for the first year.
300 for the second year from the 200 and 400 for the third year and onward. 400 a month.
400 or the 7%.
Or the 7%, correct.
Whichever-
Cap.
whichever's
For the third year?
And onward. And I thought, Councilor Lehman second.
It is. So with that, we have a motion has been called. All in favor of,
Can I just ask one more question?
oh, sorry, the question's been called. But if you want to debate the question, that's
It's just a clarification from.
sorry,
staff.
I just am trying to follow city procedure. So if you would like to debate the question, just say you would challenge. Okay, so all in favor of passing the motion as stated, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. Motion carries 5-2. And you're gonna bring that back to us then.
So the other thing that I think I heard was language on grounding. Okay.
So can I ask my question now?
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, Chris, if you got a sense of that $100. I know that it's kind of arbitrary. We pulled that out of nowhere. Did we get the sense that that's where Alyrica was comfortable in these conversations, even though it is our right to decide that?
Yeah, I'll just repeat, I guess, they read this, I told them they could provide written testimony, they could be here tonight, and they said, we're good with it the way it's written, but I didn't bounce other numbers off of them, so I'm assuming that they didn't provide any comment, that they were comfortable with what was written at the time. But I don't want to presuppose bump that up is going to have any effect or not have any effect.
And then the language that will come back, so we made the motion for this, or is that the decision, since we have language under consideration?
So Jimmy, you're just gonna talk about what you're gonna come back with?
Okay, I'm gonna come back with this ordinance, this franchise agreement. We'll have different language on undergrounding so that those two sections are consistent and that it's consistent with the city's development code. And I'll try to figure out the best way to address the kind of legacy places where things are above ground for everybody else. We'll come back with the changed fee schedule, and I had something else.
For the US mail,
Okay,
ACH.
Yes, that's easy. That'll be easy.
Excellent.
I did.
So with that, we're gonna, we'll move on to the next order of business. So thank you for that good discussion. We have Councilor Andrade will talk to us about the recent vacancy on the inclusivity committee.
Hi, everyone. So I decided against writing something up in the interest of wanting to have a larger conversation on this topic. As you have heard, we have had another resignation in the inclusivity committee. That vacancy needs to be filled. And this is part of a larger pattern of attrition of committee members, both official and unofficial committee members, which indicates that improvements can be made in how the council and the city supports the inclusivity committee. There is a lot of information, just a lot of history involving this committee, and it should be reviewed and discussed, including providing a policy or a procedure or guidance on how to replace a vacancy of an inclusivity committee member. Therefore, I don't know if I require a motion for this, but I am at least requesting to review the inclusivity resolution, to have a comprehensive review to better align the work of the committee with the original intent of Resolution 20-11 proclaiming inclusivity. Council Brewer, would I need a motion to request that work session?
A motion would be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, then I would like to make a motion to have a work session on reviewing the inclusivity, I'd like to make a motion to have a comprehensive review to better align the work of the inclusivity committee with the original intent of Resolution 20-11 proclaiming inclusivity.
So we have a motion made by Councilor Andrade and seconded by Councilor Bisco. Did you want to speak to the motion any further, or?
Basically, just like I said before, that, you know, it's concerning. There's been a lot of concerns, not just by myself, but others as well, about different aspects of the inclusivity committee, and one of those being the fact that we have had fewer and fewer people consistently coming to the meetings.
Councilor Andrade,
It's important that we have more people continue to come and participate, and it's just something that like I said, there's a lot of things that we could improve upon that I think we'd benefit council guidance from.
and Councilor Andrade, do you think that it would be better to have that conversation before the council first, or do you think that the inclusivity committee itself should provide some feedback prior to?
So originally I thought it might be best to get council ideas first to bring to the inclusivity committee, because making sure that I see it as the council's job to provide that guidance for us in the committee. And how do I phrase this? I guess making sure we've had a history of trying to do things differently in the inclusivity committee, only to be told later that that's not, that certain things aren't possible. And so however much it would be awesome to have that conversation starting there, I wonder if it would be better to have it with the council first, or perhaps just a joint. I honestly don't know. I would like to hear what other people think, but it's difficult to constantly feel like I am bringing things to the council that the council does not approve of. And I understand that part of that is just because of the nature of what it is that we're proposing and how that might not align with, say, like the public meetings laws, how we spent a whole meeting trying to have open, fluid membership where there was no real committee membership. It was just whoever showed up that day. And we spent a whole meeting on that and was not told that that didn't fall under public meeting laws until I spoke about it at the next council meeting. And so I want to prevent that from happening, because we've spent so much time, we've worked so hard. I am so proud of everything that the committee has done. And I don't want to see it fall apart without, and I feel like we could benefit a lot from having that input from council potentially first or simultaneously.
Thank you. Councilor Causey?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Things that I don't understand. If there is attrition from the committee, those who attend the committee don't necessarily attend council meeting. I don't understand why the council would be responsible for attrition from a committee. And so that makes no sense to me whatsoever. I mean, if I chose not to attend something, it would be because what was going on in that group, not because of what was going on above that group. And my other concern is, you mentioned the resolution and the intent, or the proclamation and the intent of the proclamation. But the proclamation has been reviewed twice. Only very minor revisions have been made. So I don't understand what the council has done that could be the cause of this attrition. I think the only thing we have told you couldn't do was have a completely open membership, because it does violate Oregon's public meetings laws. That wasn't our idea, but that's the way it works. We have rules we have to adhere to. And Councillor Lowe addressed that in his letter regarding the committee. So I appreciate the things you're saying. I appreciate your concern, but I do not understand.
Thank you. And Councilor, sorry, Councilor Biscoe.
So I've actually been watching some of the inclusivity things proceed over time, and I really appreciate that we developed this committee But I do feel like we could provide better guidance from the council on how to support this committee. I don't think that the statement here was that it was the council's fault per se of attrition as much it was what might be the reasons when we look at this committee, which is a very different committee. It's structured very differently. It's on a topic that is a more complex topic maybe than some of the other topics that we deal with, meaning there aren't necessarily hard lines that we're operating within, but there are feelings and emotions and past histories and harms. So I went back and I did look at the resolution. So the resolution proclaiming inclusivity. And when I see we've reviewed it twice now and we've reaffirmed it twice, but I see that there's some things in there that I don't know that we are intentionally leaning into. And I feel like this committee is the place where we could do that. And so when we look at, I know some of the original conversations, right, were how do you build community? How do we work within this council better? How do we have internal, more inclusive engagement, but then also how do we have external facing more inclusive engagement? And again, these are spaces that I don't know that there's necessarily we've done wrong or the council's responsible for, or even this committee is responsible for, as much as it is an exploration of what can we do better? How does it align with that inclusivity resolution? So number 9, for example, is commits to examining racism within our city government, city leadership. As community members, city staff, and elected or appointed officials, we commit to seeking out training opportunities to assist in identifying and eliminating racism within our city. Just pulling 1 out of 9, when I look at that, are there places we can do better, right? So it's not pointing a fault saying, hey, somebody's doing something wrong, but is there a way we can better support this committee? Because I do feel that the people that have participated, they're there because they want to be. Can we show more meaningful support from the council? And that is maybe the question more than any pointing of fingers. At least that's how I'm hearing the ask.
Councilor Nielsen?
And as an inclusivity committee member, I am a little uncertain as to how beneficial a comprehensive review would be from the council. I think we have some great guidelines. I think we've got some great goals as an inclusivity committee. I think we've gotten some really some direction and some framework now. I don't know why it is necessarily that we're having these vacancies that are occurring, individuals choosing no longer to participate, and that's a personal choice of theirs. But I do think that the committee has made great bounds in kind of getting our feet underneath us and heading and fine tuning those goals and objectives in the past 3 months very effectively. I'm not so sure that having the council involved in when we have these set objectives and goals already in place and we're making progress toward them, how effective this comprehensive review done by our city council will be, if that will form as more of a wedge between the council and the inclusivity committee rather than forming more of a joint directive and letting the inclusivity committee go forward with what their proposals have been to this point, and maybe looking at council members, increasing council membership in a different manner.
Councilor Andrade?
I'm going to try to address everything that has been said, but there's only so much I can hold in my head without being able to reply to concerns brought forward. Thank you, Councilor Bisco. You are correct in your reading of this is just asking for ways to improve because we never get it right the first time, as I'm sure we all recall from April of 2021, when we made mistakes appointing in the process of appointing people to the inclusivity committee. It's not that council is the reason for the attrition. It's just not it doesn't help that I tried to create a timeline to be able to look at how many times we have had to table topics due to city council putting something before us. And then city council saying, why haven't you done this other thing that you had to postpone because we put this other thing before you? So there's something there that can be improved upon to make sure that the things that the committee has been trying to do gets done, and we don't get frustrated at needing to postpone another conversation half a year. There's shoot. If anything, I think no. I'll raise my hand again later.
Councilor Lowe?
Well, I'm confused too, and I'm not really sure I understand. In a way, it feels like we're doing a replay of a few months ago when you alluded to it, Councilor Causey had brought up the question of how effective, how could the inclusivity committee be as effective as it would like to be, honoring all of the characteristics that are important to the committee. So I brought up the thought, well, is it best for the committee to continue the way it is with its feeling that maybe the council is not doing whatever the council should do to support the committee? But the committee decided it would be better to stay under the purview of being an official committee. And so we talked about it and said, okay, great. And then you went back and the inclusivity committee put together what I thought was a really great plan of action with goals and objectives, and sounded really great to me. And so great, go forth and do. And so I'm just confused, and now I don't know where we are. It sounds like that isn't what you want to do, or I don't understand, because I don't see the council saying do something that you don't want to do. So I guess I'm just confused.
Yeah, and I'll just add briefly that now that the inclusivity committee has those goals, objectives that we decided, in my mind, it makes a lot of sense for them to now start to move in that direction and to follow through with that. We've only had the one meeting, which was extremely productive, I thought, in that we after coming to that conclusion, and so we came up with a game plan on how to start moving forward. And we came up with a game plan on how to implement that strategy in our late August meeting, and which sounds like a great meeting. I'm going to have to miss it, unfortunately, but it sounds like a great meeting that is going to happen. And so I am in full support of empowering the committee to continue moving forward in achieving those goals and objectives. And also, I do think that it'd be more productive for the committee if the committee as a whole has a concern. I think I would want to hear that rather than a concern of an individual person on the committee, and then have that come back to us as a committee. So that's the one thought that I had. But the most important thing I think that is pressing is that we have this vacancy on the committee, and that we have to fill that, and that we have to come up with, and we have a process in doing so. So to me, that's the important thing at hand tonight. I don't remember when the vacancy actually occurred, but we do have to move forward with having to fill those things. So, Councilor Andrade.
We do not have a process. I got chewed out for trying to do something and was told, first of all, these frustrations are not just my own. As I stated earlier, others have these concerns as well. I will also point out that we had so much pushback at our last meeting regarding language about the inclusivity committee's goals and objectives, and about basic diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility tenants, and that is not okay. As Councillor Biscoe pointed out, the Inclusivity Committee is very different from any other committee. I don't think we should, this is beside the point because I want to have this discussion at a later time as a council work session where we can have a more in-depth conversation. But I don't think we should have 3 council members on this committee. This is a community unelected driven committee, and it's a problem if a quorum constitutes the 3 council members on the committee and 1 additional person from the community. That's not what this committee was about when it was formed. And if due to the nature of life and the people who come to these meetings and are passionate about it and want to be here, but they can't because of life reasons, and so we have a smaller, on average, committee of maybe 5 people instead of 6 or 7 or 8 or something, then maybe we should cut 2 council members out and it be a committee of a council member and 4 unelected people. This is the kinds of things that I'm talking about, of like, even if it's not necessarily a problem caused by the committee or the council or anything like that, there are out of the box ways to think about how we can promote this, promote the original intent of how this committee was born and what it's trying to accomplish without, it's just really important to think differently about this committee. And it's just really important to think about it differently and to remember that this is community driven as opposed to council driven. And it should be part of the city council because, as we've pointed out, this is an advisory committee. This is like the park advisory board. There aren't any council members there. It's like the planning commission. There aren't any council members there, but Councillor Causey is there to provide her insight as a council member. Why can't we be like that? That was the original goal. And I appreciate having other council members there, but maybe instead we have rotating guest council members so that everyone can be involved in some way. And it's not just, down to 3 people or 1 person from the council. And there's just lots of thoughts on this, and I would greatly appreciate it if we were to have this a bigger, better, more full conversation as a work session.
Thank you. Councillor Lehman?
Yeah, I think hearkening back to yesteryear when we formed this committee, it seemed like the committee had very specific tasks. Part of it was to create the inclusivity proclamation and resolution that we've gone through. Part of it was to establish opportunities to provide outreach and education to the community and to city staff and to the city council. None of that has happened. I think we discussed establishment of a inclusivity calendar. That hasn't happened. And in my opinion, it is a city council committee, just like the finance and admin committee, just like the police committee, just like the public works committee. It's a committee that is supposed to be putting a focus on inclusivity issues with regard to the activities of the city and trying to encourage education in the city and the community about inclusivity issues. And I haven't seen any of that happening either. And not to put too fine a point on it, but it was a year and a half just to get a mission statement and some guidelines from the committee. And so clearly, I don't think it's working the way that it was designed to work. And I think that the original intent question that continues to come up needs to be addressed as a council. What do we want as a council out of this committee? I think we've been kind of pussyfooting around about it, and nobody wants to create any confrontation with anybody on the committee. Nobody wants to create any confrontation with anybody in the community about this. But I think we just need to establish what it is exactly that we want. And if the people that are participating in the inclusivity committee now don't share that vision, then maybe that's not the committee for them. And I just think we need to start seeing something out of this, like a calendar, like some training, like some community outreach events, things like that. And that's my understanding of why we originally formed this committee. I think that we also continue to rehash the membership issue. It's a city committee. There are certain rules that need to be followed when you establish a committee. And I don't think that it's unreasonable to expect that an inclusivity committee can go through that same process. There were multiple people. There were like 12 people that applied for 5 or 6 positions. There inherently then has to be a selection process. And although that process that we attempted to use was abhorrent to some people, it is the same process that we used to fill out the membership of other city committees previously. Part of what the inclusivity committee was designed for was to make sure that our processes are more acceptable to the community and more inclusive. That was accomplished. Now we have something in place that is more inclusive for selecting committee members. So I think that was accomplished, and continuing to rehash it and refer to it as a mistake and to try and shame people over it doesn't accomplish anything, and is not the objective of that committee.
Chris, you're gonna-
I was just gonna wait just to the motion on the table, which is about having a work session. Councilor Andrade, I appreciate her comments, and she has a lot of views on this. A lot of the comments that she just previously made are really directly opposite of what the recommendation from the committee was on the membership and the makeup. That all came from the committee. As you recall, they came to the council with a recommendation of having this free flowing, and they were told, no, you have to have membership, you have to have quorum. That went back to the inclusivity committee, and they decided what the makeup of the committee would be and brought that back to the council, had that approved. But now I'm hearing that that's not what they want. They want something different. So I guess I have the same concern that if the city council is going to have a meeting and dictate to the inclusivity committee, this is what your makeup's going to be, this is what your goals are going to be, this is what we want from you. I have a concern it's not going to be well received by the membership of the inclusivity committee, as things have not been well received by members of the inclusivity committee being handed down from the city council in the past. We've heard that even this evening, that committee doesn't like the city council forcing things down on them. But yeah, I feel like that's what we're being asked with the work session is, tell us what it is that we can do to be more productive. Tell us what we can do to be more effective. I just don't know that's the best place until the inclusivity committee, as a committee, has had a chance to have this discussion. I feel like it'd be premature for the city council to have that discussion. So I'm trying to be conscious of staff time and city council time and another work session that may not be in the best interest of the city or the committee for that matter.
Councilor Andrade.
To clarify, I am not saying that what I just suggested right now was something suggested by the inclusivity committee. That was just hey, I wonder if this thing would be worth considering. Let's talk about that in a work session. If council's on board, how about we take that to the inclusivity committee? I will never advocate to have the council make a decision like that unless it's absolutely something that, is related to the city's prerogative over, what the committee can and can't do. But if it's something like the structure that the committee can choose, or, then maybe having that knowledge of from people who know what that structure looks like normally and like has experience with what it could look like. Like I'm asking for conversations to be able to bring that back to the inclusivity committee, to have that conversation with them as well. I want to, and again, these are just, I'm just spitballing. This is not me providing like, I want you to come up with a solution to this thing. I just want to talk. I just want to come up with something that can be helpful to us, because we spent the last meeting talking about an inclusivity calendar pretty much the whole time, only to be told it like 20, let's see, it was like, I don't know, 6:20 or something like that we only had the room until 6:40 when normally our meetings go until 7. Like, and so then we had to rush the end of it and weren't able to have more complete conversations about other topics that we wanted to talk about. And the fact that we talked about the calendar for such a long time, when we know that training is the most important thing. And yet, because the calendar was placed at such a priority by council, like we can't have that conversation until we've done what council has said that we should do. So what I'm asking for also is for priorities. Like, if you throw things to us, cool, we'll do it. But there are I ask that we make sure that it is the priority, because we only have so much time and we only have so much support, and we're only human. We're only all human, aren't we? But back to what Councillor Lehman was saying, thank you for those comments. It is very frustrating. And I wanted to let you know, I am not trying to shame anyone. I'm just stating a fact that we messed up, because even if it is an acceptable way to have to appoint people to committees like that, it wasn't for this kind of committee. The impact is what matters, not the intent. And the impact was that it hurt people. I only bring it up as a reminder that we can do better. And it's just a fact. I played a part in it as well. Like, we make mistakes, we learn from them, we move on. I guess yeah. Sorry, my earbuds keep going low. And I guess it's just really important to have this conversation at a much larger scale, so that we don't have things zeroed in on and lose focus of like what those priorities are.
Thank you. So I just want to make note that it's 9:26, and that I do want to get to staff reports as well. I saw Councilor Causey's hands up, and I'm going to call the question after.
So my hand was up before that.
Okay.
I'm okay if she goes first, but I would at least like the opportunity.
Councilor Causey.
I withdraw the question.
Councilor Bisco.
Great. So my comment is just this. I think so the motion was made, 35 minutes ago. Had we spent that same amount of time coming prepared to the table with this conversation, I think we could have come back with a better way on how we move forward together. There are clearly differing opinions of diversity, equity, inclusion in this room. And that's not saying that any are better or more correct than others, but it does suggest that coming to some consensus and how we support this committee moving forward is important for Philomath. So that, I believe, is why the motion was made for that work session. We could have spent an hour in a work session coming prepared to this table. Councilor Lehman, I really appreciate your points, because they're on both sides of this conversation, but they too go to the point that we could be providing better resources to this committee on how to move forward And I would still advocate for that. Of all of the things that are evident here in this room is the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion training, just the very basics and understandings and the perspectives. And again, how we come to that middle ground of where we understand a similar concept and how we move forward on behalf of our community. We're missing it. And we haven't taken that to heart or taken that seriously ever since the resolution. We've not been afforded that opportunity as a council or as a community. And that too is a space where we can do better. So I still stand behind that motion. And I think us putting in an hour's worth of work session time behind this has value. I think it speaks to the intent of this council as a body moving forward for our community as well. And that's just my comment.
Okay, thank you. So all in favor of having a council work session on this topic, please raise your hand and say aye. All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. Nay. Motion fails 2-5. With that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to staff reports.
I've just got a couple of things. Wanted to report back to the council that the enterprise zone was approved by the state of Oregon. So Philomath Enterprise Zone is now an official thing. They've already received their first application from Uncommon Cabinetry that's going in on Landmark Drive for their building and equipment. I know there's at least 2 other entities that are in discussions right now looking to potentially put an application with some existing businesses looking for business expansion opportunities. I anticipate we will have an agreement, a more formal agreement in place coming from Corvallis Benton County Economic Development. I know that they're looking at some sort of a fee structure that might eventually come into play just to help offset some costs, what that might look like. If we go to the option, I'm not seen that or been privy to any of those discussions, but we do need to have a more formal agreement in place with them to proceed. But in the meantime, they're acting as the, they've applied for and been approved as the managing or the manager for the enterprise zone. But it would be good between the 2 cities to have an agreement as well. Farmers Market, just want to report on real quick. Actually, Ruth, do you have those? Spoke to Janelle earlier from the Farmers Market, and she wants to continue to provide the city with a booth space. Wanted to make sure, I'll just be okay, I want to make sure that as we're getting into candidate season, that nobody on the council is accused of getting a candidate space at the farmers market when others who may not be city council members that might also be running for an election, whatever it might be, don't have that opportunity. And so this is a level of comfort for the farmers market. They do have a policy that they don't give booth space to like politicians, candidates, that type of thing, political movements, something like that. They're political free. And so if we're going to continue to have that free booth space at the farmers market, we need to be focused on specific topics, engagement with the city, city members about, you know, I put on here, these are kind of placeholders. I think they're topics that I've just kind of vetted out, things that I've heard of interest, but, you know, for these first couple of weeks, if we want to come prepared to talk about the City Festivals project, there's the survey that's out there right now. We could have hard copy surveys there. We could direct people to the online survey, any number of things to talk about, you know, that survey that's out there. We could do that for a couple of weeks. The Downtown Safety Streetscape project will be further along. I've got a report there here in a second as well. That could be a topic. So any one of those topics, I'm okay if topics get flipped around. If we want to substitute topics, that's fine. But my thought in just number of spots and number of council members, if everybody wanted to pick like 2 dates that worked for them and just let me know, I'll try to make that mesh with everybody. If you want to partner with another council member, you know, both of you want to go in together on a date, just let me know. You want to swap topics with a date because you can be there and you're, you know, you're specific to a specific topic. That's fine. So just work with me and with Ruth specifically on getting it filled out. Once everybody does their 2, then I'll send an email out. We'll just kind of open it to everybody else to fill in the rest of the spots. Again, just try to be fair with time to make sure everybody's got an opportunity to be engaged with the community at the farmers market. Any questions on that? So we'll use a digital copy. We'll fill it out digitally. Once it's full, then we'll send out, we'll just email the copy out to everybody so everybody knows the schedule and where everybody's at. Councilor Biscoe.
So will the city then be providing the table, the tents, and all of the material?
Yes, so staff will commit to spending some time prior to, depending on who's on here. I will leave it to the council members to reach out to staff ahead of time. Let us know, if you want some printed materials, some maps. That'd be fine. We can grab tables from here. We can grab some chairs from here. And I can provide a canopy. We've got a canopy we can provide.
And
So
you'll be setting that up as well?
no, I would rely on the councils to do that. I'm not gonna hire city staff to come in and do that.
And then just to be clear, so this is something that Councilor Andrade and I started, which has been neutral and non-campaign related all along, and the city broad representation just to city council. So no offense taken that we're looking at this. I think it's a good plan, but we are scheduled for the September 4th Saturday already. Are you asking us to step down from that booth space then?
I can put your names down on that date right now if you want. There's the first two. Anybody else want to put dibs right now? Or you just want to send an email? All right.
And then just to be clear on so 10:30 to approximately 3:30 is the time. So by the time we're done setting up and tearing down and such, that's generally the commitment for this obligation.
Right. Thanks. I'll include the time on the final one that goes out. Thank you for that. Also, I've got making some preparations for council chambers. Staff's picked out new carpet that'll be replacing. The dais is going to come out, and so that's going to trigger the need for carpet on top of everything else, including the stains and just the wear. This carpet served us well, but its time has come and gone. The dais is going to come out, and my recommendation is going to be that we move forward with purchasing some tables. And the color didn't come through on these great. And I'm not actually set on the color. This is kind of a mahogany top and I think a silver base, which would go with the chair, or a black base, the rod kind of like the chair, so it matches the chairs, or the new chairs. But these tables, they're privacy table. They've got the privacy screening in the front. And then, as you can see, they fold up vertically and then stack so that we're not having to have staff load and unload tables and haul these around a little bit. They're not overly heavy, but they do take a bit of a beating going up and down all the time. The goal would be with these, where they're on the casters, they can be, wheeled around and moved around to different configurations a lot easier than what we do with these. A little bit less wear and tear on the carpet as well, where these get dragged around a little bit more than what they should. The goal would be to purchase enough these. We'd have a similar configuration to what we have with these tables. They just look a little bit nicer, a little more formal. And my experience has been, since we've gone to this configuration, I've actually found we take down and set up a lot less than what we were having to do when we were meeting at the dais. When the council was meeting at the dais, we would have to break down and take down for every city council meeting. But every other meeting that was in here, they liked a circle or a half circle or a, sort of like a U shape, because that was more conducive for having meetings in groups, as opposed to everybody come and sit in a meeting, like we do and have a family reunion or a church meeting. Everybody just sits in a straight line, right, and looks at the wall. Everybody sits around and looks at each other. And so I do think this is more conducive to having a public meeting, have the public present, haven't had an issue having them come to the table. The video, all that kind of stuff still works. So it's still a little bit fluid as far as, is the camera going to go there, or is it going to go here? Are the tables going to go there? Are they going to go there? This will allow some flexibility to experiment a little bit and see what works well, see what the council likes, see what works well for the public. We've got to be able to expand out for budget committee meetings. We've got to be able to expand way down for court hearings and those types of things. So we want to have the flexibility. At least in the short term, we want the library and other organizations to be able to continue to use this room as a multi-purpose room. So these tables, being the recommendation, moving those through. They're within the budget between carpet and tables and some AV system. We're going to be at our $30,000 budget that we had to redo this room. I may be coming back to you if we feel like we need more than one TV, for example. or if we want to upgrade and do more than one camera so we can get a couple different angles, that may be over that $30,000 budget, depending on what the AV number comes in at, the new microphone system, new processor, new computer, everything else to run this system. This is quite kind of dated and isn't going to be able to be upgraded. We're just going to have to replace, at the very least, the processor in order to do the live capture, what's called amplification and live stream. Our processor just doesn't do it. So we got a all new processor. It's pretty spendy. We'll revamp the microphones where we can, but we'll probably look at a lot of new microphones and whatnot. So we're going to spend the majority of $30,000 on the audio, which is good. This is a lower cost option for us. A new dais in and of itself, you're looking anywhere between $70,000 to $300,000 to this, you know, the sky's the limit on how much you could spend for a nice looking dais. And my opinion, and again, I'm open to different interpretations, my opinion is the dais is a little bit of a relic. I think it sends a little bit of the wrong message to the public of being inclusive, not being up above everybody else, of, you know, being, again, a little bit more of a discussion and group, good group format. So I like the options this provides. So unless I hear any concerns or comments, I'd like to proceed with getting these tables purchased and getting those here. Sure.
Mostly about the court.
Mhm.
Just wondering if the lack of a dais is gonna impact the way the court operates and the perception of
Yeah,
it.
we'll still have a platform that we'll need to develop. So there'll be a platform. We'll still have, if it's not this table, it'll be something similar, but I'm working with the judge on what that will look like. But it's going to be something, again, maybe on casters, we can still bring out. We have court twice a month. Not a perfect solution there, but I don't see that being a permanent structure that we build into City Hall or to the City Council chambers. It'll be a portable type of.
I see a couple hands up, and I'm gonna, at a quarter till, I'm gonna ask everybody to vote on whether or not they want to continue, just so you know. So we got 5 minutes more to have a conversation. I see Councilor Andrade hand is up.
Yeah, for the sake of accessibility, can you, I don't know if someone with a laptop is the ability to screen share, or if you want to show us at home here at the camera what it looks like, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Chelsea's working on it.
And
See what I can do, Jessica.
Is it possible to change the configuration of how the public could sit rather than just, because
see
we have a
that?
side that they only see the back. Could
So
we
those
have it kind of
folding
swivel down?
tables that kind of fold and you can push them into a corner. And then they have a privacy panel.
Very cool. Thank you.
The first configuration I'd like to try and give, I'll be quick. The first configuration I'd like to try is this, just set back against this wall more
Okay.
with the chairs seated here. So when the public enters, they're entering from the side and they can get to the restroom and all that without really disturbing the meeting.
Right.
I mean, when you get this set up, it's like you go to the bathroom, everybody sees you get up and go to the bathroom and they can time you and see how long it takes you. But with this pushed back and the chair sitting there, I think that group meeting can still take place and the public still has good access. They can come and go without disrupting too many things. My concern was the windows and the lighting and all. So, but that would be, I think, the first thing we try is to pull back. The other concern is if we pull back is the distance from the TV and the monitor. So then you're looking at, do you add a monitor there? Do you add a monitor there? So we'll have to play with it a little bit, but this will give us some flexibility to see what works and what doesn't before we get married to anything. The camera, we can move anywhere. The TV, we can move just about anywhere. We'll have to have a control center for this kind of works, but really it'd be ideal for Ruth and or staff be able to monitor Zoom and all that stuff from their seat as opposed to up and down all the time. And so there's some other things we need to tweak, but we'll have some time to do that.
Thank you.
Will you be donating the tables and other materials we're not using or selling them, or what will you do?
These tables we'll keep, we'll still use them. Like when the library wants to come in and do their arts crafts, we'll be more than happy to let them use these tables. We'll probably use them for farmers market. We'll actually, I think, be able to use these tables maybe a little bit more for things, but right now we're a little bit guarded on them because it's the city council tables. So we'll probably be able to use these a little bit more liberally and maybe, like I said, lend them out a little more liberally within this room and to the groups. But this material will be hard to salvage. It's pretty custom. I don't know what Public Works has planned. Public Works crew is gonna do the demo for us on this. And yeah, I just don't know what the plan is. The chair certainly will try to find a good home for. But yeah, we'll be here.
Councilor Andrade.
Do you think the theater department or something like that might want some of that? Just thinking about how lots of theater departments like large props. I don't know how easily it would be able to take the dais apart like that.
It's gonna come out in pieces. About that big. Yeah.
Well, something to consider maybe.
It's very much one piece. It's kind of a massive, I believe this was moved from the old city hall on Main Street.
It had rough cedar on it.
Yeah, so it's got holes and things in a variety of places back here.
That's all I have for my report. Yeah.
Thank you. With that, go ahead.
Anyone wanting to attend the small cities meeting here on August 19th, if you'd like help registering, I'm happy to do that for you. Please reach out to me. And number two, I wanted to mention that we have received over 100 responses to the survey on the website. That's in about less than a week. So we're getting them both in paper form with utility bills, and we're getting them online.
Excellent. And actually, I'm just gonna want to check with everybody. If you want to, we can continue this meeting until 10 o'clock if you want, or until people are done. Just want to raise your hand, and if you want to extend the meeting beyond that. Okay. So all opposed, please use your hand and say nay.
Talk about 10 o'clock.
We do it
10 o'clock.
5 minutes?
5 minutes. Okay, we extend
5 minutes.
we extend the meeting for 5 minutes. Please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So, okay, we got it until, go ahead, Councilor Lehman.
You said you were going to give us the streetscapes update, and you didn't.
Thank you. I'm gonna run numbers off the top of my head. This might be a little dangerous. The construction budget for a streetscape project was, I believe, $11.3 million. The low bid, we got multiple bids in it. I think 4 bids came in. The low bid on it came in at $13.6 million, which was $2.6 million over. ODOT, Bill Ness. Hello, Bill. Bill Ness is our greatest advocate right now. He is going through the bids line by line, determining what is inside the curb, what is outside of the curb, what should be ODOT responsibility, what should be city responsibility. That report's going to ODOT, and then we will hear from ODOT higher ups, and then we will hear from ODOT on how we are going to proceed. I don't have any more details than that. But I can tell you that the high bid was like $17 million. The next highest bid above the 13.6 was in the 14.7, 14.8 range or so. They're available publicly. You go to ODOT's website and you can find your way through the website to find all the bid and all the information. But the most important part is, again, what are we looking at for how much of that is ODOT going to pick up and how much are they going to look to the city to say, hey, can you step up with a few more dollars? I just have no idea what that number is going to be at. So as soon as I know, I'll come back.
Thank you. Councilor Lehman.
Recently, the state has finalized their new carbon reduction rules and whatnot, and not getting any detail on that, but the upshot is it looks like we're going to have to redo our transportation plan, and they're going to provide money for us to do that. But I just want to make everybody aware that we just did it 3 years ago, I think, and we're going to have to redo it again under the new rules. That is, unless the election puts a different person in office, then they'll redo the rules again, and then we'll redo the transportation plan.
And what I'm hearing is it'll be an update, not necessarily a full redo. Our last was a complete overhaul, essentially. This will be more of a revision or an update to bring in the new requirements into our existing TSB. But I'm hoping it won't be as nearly as extensive what the last update was.
Thank you. Anyone else? With that, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for being here. Have a